you can be a good person and you can care about justice, and you can still be a hindrance to progression.
Alexander Blake, welcome to Making It.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. It's always great to talk with you, and I'm excited about spending an hour with you for some unedited, luxurious conversation about music and life in the world. Let me start off by just saying congratulations on finishing your doctorate. And I just get tired just, thinking about how much school, as a highly educated person myself, just props to you. And really, yeah, it's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, there's a lot of school.
Yeah.
So glad to be done.
Right.
Glad to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not ignoring the pandemic, I just wanted to say, how are you holding up? I know it's been challenging for so many of us, certainly performance-wise. That's off the table for now. Although you and so many of us have been doing virtual performances that we'll be talking about, but also just being isolated. You're used to being around a lot of people. How you feeling? How you holding up?
Yeah, I actually probably have not been this busy in a very long time. I'm on Zoom teaching lessons and as of late having a lot of conversations around, the subjects that are leading our field in terms of diversity and inclusion internationally as well. So I feel like I've definitely kept up my social skills. Finding other ways. It is unfortunate to not be able to perform. I would say the summer is a little bit of a lighter time anyway. So I think certainly missing that from, March on. But just trying to find other ways to stay busy and to stay motivated. And there's certainly a lot to do even in this time. So.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing this interview for a while, and it actually got harder to pin you down than easier once the pandemic hit.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Who would have expected that? I know so many of us musicians are trying to find ways, to keep our art form going. And so I feel very blessed and fortunate to have found some opportunities to get involved.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear it. And by the way, I'm going to do a few shameless plugs through this conversation. And why don't we start with the obvious? You had mentioned that you were doing online teaching. You've got, in addition to the mentoring and all of the teaching that you're doing, you have a very specific sight reading course that you offer where people can have one-on-ones with you for, I believe, an hour or an hour and a half. And was it 45 minutes or half hour? I don't remember. There were three options.
Right. Yeah. Usually most of the students just choose an hour, but there are options for an hour and a half. I have done a 2-hour session, but it was sight reading and conducting.
Right. How can people find you so that they can sign up?
They can go on the website. There is a website, alexanderlblake.com/lessons, and you can see all of the options there.
Thank you for that. And why is it important to you? I mean, obviously you are a believer in education, but I know that your intention in addition to making a living and sharing information, teaching is a part of what we all do, or so many of us, and it's a very important part of what we do. But there's a deeper level of intention in you wanting to teach sight reading to, can I say, level the playing field or just up everybody's game regarding diversity? Yes.
I mean, generally, what I have found is that, vocal education programs throughout education systems and beyond sometimes do not prioritize reading. And so I found that through my education, kind of growing up through singers, and especially after I joined the union, joined SAG-AFTRA, and started to see, some of the requirements to get in some of the rooms in terms of, film sessions. Sight reading is definitely a skill that is needed. And depending on what tradition and how you grew up with your educational setting, sight reading could have been a part of it or maybe not. And so I found, especially with a lot of amazing readers who grew up with more oral tradition or non-classical training, that they are amazing singers, obviously, but the sight reading portion has not been as developed. And so since that is a tradition that I come from, I guess both traditions, right? I grew up singing gospel music. I actually feel like in some ways that helped my ear more than any of the classical training. Mm-hmm. And so now I feel, with having both of those traditions under my belt, that I can use a particular experience to help other singers who grew up with the oral tradition find an accessible way into sight reading. And so they can also, too, be in these rooms. Because really, I think that's probably one of the only things that's keeping people back.
Right. Right. Because they already have the skill, the talent. They've got the instrument and they know how to use it and they know how to blend. But like you said, they come from the oral tradition and they're lacking that skill. But one of the things, I read some of the comments from students who have studied with you on your online course, and they talk about you creating a safe zone for them where they can feel comfortable and not defensive, where you actually instill confidence in them as well.
Thank you. Yeah. I find that not most, but a lot of the challenge around sight reading is the mental belief that we have been told that we can't do it.
Right.
And so really, I find that part of the sight reading lessons, I'm as much of a cheerleader as, as an educator, really just telling people we are fighting this belief, this cultural belief that it's going to be harder for us to sight read. And really that's not the case. And I like to tell the students, especially ones who come from oral traditions, there are certain ways that I like to teach that use the skills that you have. Like you already have the oral skills. So really we are just putting names and intervals and theory to what you already know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that one of the biggest things I got out of learning and studying in conservatory was that music theory, which seemed very daunting and highly intellectual and kind of scary in some ways, was basically just explanations of what sounded good and why. And the notes were basically just a way to notate somebody's original idea, somebody's thought. And when I started looking, and no teacher told me that, it was an observation in watching how I was responding in school with either embracing and or being intimidated by information. And then I just realized it's like learning how to be literate to read a book. And then you can lose yourself in a Stephen King novel or something that was written 200 years ago. And certainly, obviously, with music, Bach or Mozart, those guys, they were just dudes. They were musicians. They had day gigs. Their side hustle was working in a church.
Right.
And we're reading this as sacred information, and in many ways it is. But it was just like you or I when we write music. We have an idea, we have a sense of inspiration, and it's a way to notate it, and then it's a way for other people to get inside of our imagination and bring it to life. And so I think it's just great, that you are offering that and offering it that in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the way it's taught is important. I think also the lens at which we see it is important. I don't think a lot of teachers come from oral tradition. Obviously, a lot of teachers come from classically based traditions. And so they teach it in that way, which is kind of sometimes sight first, hear later, right, which is kind of opposite from obviously those who have oral skills. And so, my thing is, can we find the things that you hear? Can we find the notes and the patterns that you hear first? And then we put names and patterns to them, as opposed to let's look at this and then try to figure it out. That's not how Bach did it.
Right.
So,
So I wanted to start off by talking about tonality, but I also want to talk about you and your upbringing. So let's just blend the two.
Sure.
We'll start briefly with tonality, and then more about you, so people get who you are and how you ended up who you are today and why. And then we'll continue with more about tonality, because I have a lot to say about the group and your work with them. But you guys, you were established in 2016. And you're essentially an award-winning ensemble known for open-hearted singing, which is a great way to really define what you guys do. And you also premiered your first album in 2019 called Sing About, and it's available on iTunes, so everybody go check it out. So what's your mission statement on tonality?
Sure. Tonality is a group that focuses on, as you said, unity, social justice. Diversity is certainly the way that we like to go about expressing these messages through both the singers and the genres and composers that we work with, to make sure that we get a well-rounded as we can of a perspective around the things that we're all struggling and dealing with and working through as humans.
So define diversity, because you broad stroke it in your group.
Yeah. So, diversity, I mean, the diversity that we deal with is mostly racial, cultural, but I think really just not just noting or, utilizing, but really validating the different people and cultures, really making sure that people feel heard and represented, but they also have some agency in how their cultures are represented. Which includes, to me, it's diversity and inclusion, because you can just have diversity and just have people be different, but the lens is still the same. But really including people in all aspects of what we do, how we talk about the subjects, who speaks at the concerts, when we do different genres, bring in the composers to really make sure that we're not guessing or estimating at styles. Really just trying to find a way that really kind of like diversity is in every single aspect of what we do.
When you just use the word inclusive, it reminded me of the first time I went to hear your choir sing with you conducting. And it was inclusive in so many more ways than I would have expected. I expected it from the choir and from you, because that's what I knew about you and that's what I had read about, with all the promo and everything and publicity with your, and I went to your website. I wanted to know really what I was going in to see so I could fully embrace it. You extended further than the choir. You made the audience feel inclusive. And I'm not just talking about, emotionally, physically, you made us inclusive in two ways. One was early on in the concert, might have even been the opening piece. The choir actually came out in the audience and surrounded the audience. So wherever you sat and whichever way you turned your head, you were hearing the music. You were inside of it, literally. I immediately felt included in your process. And it was really pretty great for me. And for everybody just looking around. But I also love that you didn't just put the sopranos on the left and the tenors on the right. They were staggered groups. So wherever you listened, you would hear an alto part or a tenor part or a soprano part, baritone part, which was, most people don't get to experience unless they're actually singing in a choir, or sitting in an orchestra. So your inclusivity expanded. The other thing is you had us all sing, later on in the concert. And it was really fun because it was an original piece of music that we had never heard. It was not a folk song, it was a legit classical piece of music that was very sophisticated. And you just very easily, just effortlessly invited us all to sing along once it was established, that when the melody was established. And then you went with key changes, you modulated. And as simple as just as you were conducting, you just sort of like looked over, with a twinkle in your eye at the audience and kind of nodded up. And then we went up. And I was so enamored by that. I thought it was really daring, but it also really actualized and made physical this inclusiveness and this diversity that you have, because the audience also was not just filled with other singers. It was filled with non-singers, and it was filled with people of all different ages, backgrounds, colors, shapes.
Yeah, the dream. That's what we want for our concerts. We don't get a lot of that in classical choral concerts, frankly.
Yeah. It was great, Alex. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, and we kind of depend on the fact that we know that our singer friends are in the audience. So we could do those things like, key changes with audience singing and not feel totally scared. But no, to me, it's so important. I think, especially with the messages that we're giving, it is not us giving messages to you. Like, this is our world to fix. And so I feel like pieces and opportunities like that allow us to embody that musically.
Mm-hmm. All right. We'll circle back to tonality and how you become more, you enable and create opportunities for your audience to actually get involved, instead of just like making them feel like, wow, that was really important. Now what? So we're going to get back to that activism aspect of it. Let's talk about you. I know that you were born, actually, we're born a day apart. October 20th for me, October 19th for you.
Okay.
So fellow Libra, that's one of the reasons I think we are just friends, and comfortable with each other. We do have some similar points of view in process. But you were born in Jacksonville, North Carolina. You were born a year before I made my first record in 1987. Mm-hmm. So, and you have accomplished and are accomplishing an amazing, and creating an amazing legacy of work in your short time on this planet. So, I can't wait to continue to see what you do with your life and with your music. What was it like growing up? Was there music in the house? You sang in church, but obviously you got some legit training. Tell me what your family was like and what it was like growing up.
Yeah. Jacksonville, North Carolina, very small town. No one knows it really.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there was music in the house in terms of, I remember dancing a lot when I was younger. Mm-hmm. But my parents are not particularly musical. And really, it was just my training really came in the church. Mm-hmm. I remember my mother told me, obviously I don't remember it, but she told me one time that I had a toy keyboard when I was like 3 or 4, and I played something that was on the TV. But of course, us not knowing really anything about music, no one really kind of went with that. It's just kind of like, oh, that was interesting. I sang in church, and then eventually I was the only kid to sing in the adult choir because I just kind of picked up harmonies easily. Mm-hmm. And I remember taking a couple of music lessons at the church, just kind of hanging around, our pastor's son, who was also a pastor, but was also the accompanist for the choir. And so just hanging around, learning keys and learning how to play like 1 or 2 songs on the piano. And then I went into middle school and took choir there. That's kind of my first choir. And my middle school teacher taught sight reading, Brad Benson, amazing teacher. Taught sight reading a little bit before each class. And to me, it just always made sense. Like I was going to major in math. So to me, sight reading and theory is numbers. Mm-hmm. At least it's a system that you can count on in so many ways that we can't count on other things sometimes. I just kind of grew up and still really loved theory and did honors choir, and that was kind of my hook into choral singing. and then just kind of kept going through high school. I went to a summer program at Governor School. It's called Governor School.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the place, and that was the summer that I realized, I thought I'm just a nerd for my town, my small town. And then I went to Governor School, which was a statewide, summer program, and realized, I might know some things generally.
Mm-hmm.
And the weirdest thing was I took the AP Music Theory test leading into college, and we didn't offer the class at my high school. And so my thought was, I'll take the test and fail it, but at least I'll see, where I am going into college. And actually, I passed. Mm-hmm. And the first time I ever did dictation was on that test, which was exciting, but also once I got to college, I skipped the first semester, which is what you do when you get a high grade. But I realized very quickly I didn't know what I was doing. The second semester, they were doing review that first weekend. I remember they were asking things like fugue and subject, and I was like, I've never heard these words. So that was catch up. But again, because of the oral skills, I want to make this point. The days where we went over musical terms, I certainly was having to catch up. But the days that we did dictation were like, those are my days that I led, because I had that oral skills from being in an oral tradition. And so, that's kind of how things got started for me. So
how did the activism aspect of pretty much everything that you do incorporate into that? Were you growing up, were you basically were you taught to speak your mind, or were you taught to hide who you were?
Definitely hid. Okay. Definitely hid who I was. And I was certainly closeted in North Carolina. I was a young church leader. And so definitely did not feel like opening up and talking about any of that. Mm-hmm. And then, but I will say in middle school, I read every single book on slavery and civil rights in the middle school library. Like that was the subject.
On your own?
On my own.
Okay. Besides the obvious, if people were listening and not looking, that you're Black, but was that something? Was that your curiosity? Was that you feeling like you really? What was your inspiration for wanting to know more about that? And did your family? I mean, what was it like growing up in your family with that? Did you guys talk about civil rights and slavery? Were you told to? Were you told that you had to work twice as hard to get half as far, like all the traditional things that we hear? Or did your teachers encourage you, or it's just you just knew that you needed to know more about that?
I don't really know how I got started. I do know that my church went to a Holocaust museum when I was younger. But maybe because of my own experience, family life was not actually that positive. Because of my own experience and just the all the things about, growing up in my household. But I don't think I really fit in. I certainly didn't feel open to talking about a lot of things. But maybe that, I don't know where that kind of inner kind of passion developed. Probably from church, actually. We all tend to kind of gain our own messages. And my church, luckily, was never about kind of browbeating. Like the thing I remembered was that, Jesus' love was all encompassing. That's kind of the biggest message I remember from church. I don't know what it was, but as soon as I got on a subject, this is kind of like me in all aspects, food and otherwise. I find what I like and I pretty much stay in that lane. And so when I started reading about slavery and reading about civil rights, like those are the subjects that really hooked me. And something about justice, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a Libra, who knows. But I remember commercial it was that made me so mad. Was it Lucky Charms, or like the guy, like the leprechaun could never get, like like something about that always ticked me off.
Mhm.
But anyways, that aside, I don't know what it was, but something about those stories always kept me hooked. And so I just really read and kind of instilled in me in a young age the things I needed to know. But I think also growing up Black and gay and Christian in North Carolina taught me a lot about identity, and a lot about kind of fighting to be oneself. Even if I wasn't prepared to have those fights at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I was learning kind of in silence.
That makes sense. Since we're circling what's going on in this world right now with George Floyd's death and people hopefully starting to wake up and keep their eyes open, how are you relating to this? I mean, and how are you participating? One way is you just were involved in a song and a video. Why don't we start with that?
Sure.
Let's talk about this new video that you were just involved in.
Thanks. Yeah. The video is an arrangement by Jared Jenkins, of "Feeding Off the Love of the Land," which is has been originally performed by Stevie Wonder, written and performed by Stevie Wonder, in a collective now called Black Artists for Black Lives. And so really, timing is just always interesting and divine. But we had started this after the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And I remembered calling Danielle Withers, who is a beautiful singer and songwriter in our town. And, being on Facebook and social media, having seen that she had always been posting about these issues, I just called her. We had been around each other, but hadn't been particularly, close. But we just had a conversation, kind of a short conversation, just about, what would it mean for us to respond from our own community about these things? Because, sure, this is a human issue, but it really is. And at that time, I mean, it sounds weird to talk about now when the whole world has been talking about George Floyd, but at the time, comparingly, it was silent.
Right. Yeah.
And so, not feeling like we needed to wait for other people to care for us to kind of make, and in my thought too, Tonality does this all the time. We use music to state about these things. And so Daniel and I, that first conversation became a couple 2-hour conversations. And they quickly just became action. And it was so beautiful to work with her. We went right in. It was funny when we were thinking about the arranger, we both said, okay, Jared Jenkins. Oh, you said the same thing. All right, great. And it really just started to turn into this action. And then we were able to get Michael Abels in. And we always said from the beginning, this was about the victims. It wasn't about us. And I think that intention gave space for this to become such a bigger musical outlet than we thought. I mean, the project has turned out to be so much greater. We're able to get so many more people involved. And I really feel like it has been something that we as artists can offer to this conversation, but also an example of the greatness and the excellence that can come from the Black community, because everything from the ideas, the organizing, the contracting, the arranging, the engineering and mixing and mastering, the video, all the things are done within our community. And there are certainly times where, we all want to come together as a human community. But I did think that this was a particular moment for us to be able to speak on behalf of our own specific pain and trauma and healing from within our own subset of this human experience.
I read on your website, I believe, I'm going to read a quote of yours. speaking to this. Murals are not change. Removal of statues is not change. Statements in black squares are not change. Playing Lift Every Voice at a sports game is not change. Removing problematic symbols on syrup is not change. I'm paraphrasing now, leaving out a section. I say this to say that we cannot let up, we cannot stop screaming, and we cannot settle. We are too close to seeing and realizing actual change to celebrate an increase of awareness. Keep fighting. Fight as if we have just scratched the surface, because that is where we are. Those are powerful words, and you are stepping up and living that truth. You know, I think it's so important right now for people to get back. You've been doing this for a long time, but to get back to using music to influence culture and politics. You know, which happened a lot back in the 60s. And, you know, Gil Scott-Heron, the revolution will not be televised. You know, we could keep quoting all day long, not just black artists, white artists, but people, you know, shook the tree, you know, using art. And I think it's really commendable that you are doing that consciously, you know, and using it to continue to go deeper than just scratching the surface of creating change and maintaining change. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, what's the hardest part, I think, of getting people to wake up or stay woke or to be involved, and people in your community, people outside of your community? What needs to happen in your heart? What do you want to see happen here?
You know, I think a short answer is seeing people uncenter themselves, especially non-Black people, when it comes to these subjects. What I have found is, it's funny, you know, I first moved to California, coming from North Carolina, and certainly have had my incidences of, you know, outward racism.
Right.
There. I mean, I came here when I started my master's at UCLA, and I remember I was asked a couple of times, you know, oh, this must feel a lot different than you felt in North Carolina, you know, in terms of race. And I remember thinking, you know, yeah, sure. You know, certainly hadn't been at a school with that kind of demographic. When you ask that a couple of times, you know, you feel like, oh, okay, that's an interesting question. When you continue to be asked that question, it starts to say something.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why are you so desperate for me to tell you that you are not racist? And why is that one of the first questions you ask me as a Black person? And really that became the epitome of my experience with progressive communities, frankly. Mm-hmm. It's not that I particularly feel racism differently here. It's that I'm told and I'm expected to feel it differently because people supposedly know better. And what I find, you know, frankly, I'm not really that concerned with changing the conservative mindset. I don't think I'm going to live long enough to be able to do all of that work. My work, and to me, the hardest part is to get people to see that you don't have to be, you can be a good person and you can care about justice and you can still be a hindrance to progression. Mm-hmm. And I think getting people to see that meaning well does not mean doing well. And I also posted this on Twitter, you know, if you hit me by accident, if you swatted a fly and you hit me in the face, so for so many years here, I feel like I was expected to say, you know, while that hurt, I know that your mother didn't teach you violence. And I'm sure your hand hurts, and let me find ice for you to go along with this analogy. And I was like, no, you hit me in the face, even if it's by accident, like how you feel about it is between your therapist and whatever deity you worship. It is my job to tell you that my face hurts. And I think we're seeing this in a huge way. You don't have to be outwardly and blatantly racist to perpetuate racism. When the system is inherently designed, has been from the beginning, to center whiteness at the expense of other people, if you're not actively resisting that system, you are perpetuating it. And I think people are finally starting to realize that aspect. And so what I've said to friends is, I will compromise. I will not yell at people for taking so long to realize. I also won't sit here and wait for you to feel better about your guilt or shame. We need to move. So that's kind of what I am seeing. But when I posted this, I've been getting, again, these questions, kind of recurring questions. They say more than I think people realize. And so I've been asked a couple times in the past week or so, do you feel like things are getting better? And I was just like, again, the first couple times you're like, oh, okay, interesting. And then we keep being asked, I was like, let me just address this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm so fortunate that we are seeing shifts of awareness. And we're seeing representation that people are really understanding how deep this goes, how American this problem is. But certain people, certain subsets of our community finally becoming aware of this does not define where we are in this fight. I've been doing this certainly for a couple of years, but like our community has been fighting for justice since we arrived in this continent. And if you think about, the plight of Native Americans, since this country has started, this issue of systemic racism has defined who we are in terms of our interactions with people as Americans. So I would love to see that people kind of really take that in. And I've been saying to friends, I almost feel like we should be looking at some of these systems with a pessimistic view, not in order to become negative, but to really assume first that the system is inherently designed to be unequal. Then be proven wrong. I think most of the time you'll find that a lot of these systems actually work the way they're designed to work. And again, I don't mean pessimism in the way of thinking negatively. I just mean thinking realistically about how deep the roots are and what we really need to do to make some foundational changes in the ways we've seen so many things that we've taken for granted function.
Very clearly said, Alex. As I'm listening to you speak, I'm rethinking my question that I asked you when you talked about in junior high school, delving into deep reading about slavery and American history. And I think the better question for me to have asked, not the why, but what did you really learn from all of that reading? And I think, and it feels like you're speaking to that now. It's about a very long history of a system being built to work specifically in a racist way. Quite simply, I mean, are those the kind of things that you learned from all of the reading that you did, and certainly just from living, of course?
Right. I mean, I think both. It was kind of like the things I read further solidified how I felt.
Right.
But I think also gave me, some really interesting perspectives. It also helped me realize that, like, as a religious person, as Jesus did, so many people have lived and lost their lives for the fight for all people to be equal, and for those who feel like power is inherently theirs, to share what those freedoms could be. And so it also gives me some strength to think so many people have come. I say, people have lost their lives. I sit here screaming at choirs, like I'm going to be fine. um, but
You get
that
the
work,
job done, though.
yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I talk about that as if it could be an inhibitor of opportunity, and it can be. I know it has been for so many people, but really, I have found the more honest and vulnerable, and the more determined I become to really speak about the things that matter, the more opportunities have come. I mean, I am in the union, and I feel like you and I are having this talk because of Tonality. And so I think it has been my experience that the more I kind of come at the work that I do kind of with open hands, and in service, particularly of those who might not feel the same opportunities to speak up, it actually has continued to open up more opportunities than I could have imagined.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I can't wait to see what you continue to do with the rest of your life. I think that you were just scratching the surface of the greatness of the work that you are going to continue to be a part of.
Thank you.
To initiate as well, because you have a really strong intention, and it is not limited. It's actually advanced by your musical gift and skill, and they're two separate things, very connected. But you are as great of a singer and conductor as you are because of the hard work that you've put in, not because you just were born with a great voice. What you are, your foundation, with Tonality, you are involved in a lot of the community, and with a lot of people who are activists, who I know that you have learned ways to not just motivate and shake the tree again, to get people to feel anything, to feel uncomfortable, to feel compassionate, empathetic, to feel concerned, to feel upset, to actually take in the injustice that we're talking about, that continues to live and persist. What are a couple of tips for people who want to get involved, or do something that helps be part of the movement? And when I say the movement, I'm just talking about the big picture, diversity, which is the original intention of Tonality.
Sure. I think the first thing would to recognize the ways that the environment could be more diverse. There are some of these, again, systemic things that might take a while, but some of the changes can be made immediately.
For example, I don't mean to put you on the spot. You don't need to answer, but we're talking about, like, in film and television, to create opportunities for more people of color to step into positions that are available, and not in stereotypical ways.
Sure. Auditions.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking systemic issues, so we can find systemic ways to fix them. I think auditions would be certainly a great way to allow everyone equal access to some of these opportunities. I know we had a SAG meeting, and Alvin Chia so beautifully expressed, ideas of a 75-25 rule. I won't go into all of that now. If you want to look at that, though, it's on YouTube. Session Singer Family Meeting. But yeah, just allowing people to audition, and so you don't have to deal with assumptions made. Because really, there are so many singers. I feel like Tonality, every time we have a concert, it's just another example of the fact that there are so many singers of color who are ready to do the work as the work is defined right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there just need to be ways to bring those people in. I know there is work, right? We have contractors who are involved and have never missed a concert in the past year, and bring in Tonality singers. So that has certainly been helpful. I do also think that diversity of agency empower is helpful. I said to someone, if we had a contractor who couldn't walk, they would be a lot more attentive to, the ramp, going to a session. And I certainly don't mean to talk about race as a disability, but I do talk about the issue as lack of access.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, having different people of all types of identities be in positions that are able to help choose the way the environment looks. People with their different experiences are going to prioritize different ideals in various ways. And those differences and those experiences that contractors, or music supervisors, composers, all, through the levels bring, would allow for I think, more opportunity to make these rooms diverse in so many ways and inclusive.
How is that being received by the people in power? What's your experience so far on that?
I don't know. I will say the statements have been made that people agree and that they're going to do the work. And I do feel, especially from this SAGME specifically, we have been heard. Kind of like in all things, I will be interested to see what that looks like. We're in a place now where a lot of the sessions and things are closed.
Right. Yeah.
And so, the opportunity to really exercise these new strategies is still ahead of us. I do know that some contractors have already started with this implementation, and it brought them more diverse singers. Now, will we be seeing a rush of this? I don't know. Change is not always as fast as we'd like. But to me, the best way to go about things is to assume that people don't know unless you've had the opportunity to tell them. And now the YouTube is there, the chats are there. We know that everyone's heard. We know who has heard. And so, as we move forward, it'll just be to remind and encourage people in our community who I do believe do care about diversity, that it's a benefit to everyone to have these systems change.
I agree with that, absolutely. It is a benefit to everybody. Although I would imagine I know that there are a lot of people I see that would disagree with us on that.
Sure.
And it's disheartening, shameful, embarrassing, disappointing. But there are a lot of angry people, and a lot of people still in our country that live in fear of anything that might be different from them and or anyone. And it's hard to create change.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just kind of to me, than just the ignorance factor. I think a lot of people have tied their identity and their successes, at least their self-worth and how they see themselves, to this idea of this inherent I'm better, I have more because I've done more in my tradition, in my family. They worked hard, and this is why we have what we have. And again, you can't take away from people's experience, but there's also a perspective of some of what we have is due to the systems in place. In the same way that, me becoming a doctor of music was certainly laid out because my mother was an educator and got her master's. And so, you couldn't live in my house and not make good grades. So like that, to me, it wasn't something that I had to see. Like I always knew that education was a way to excel.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that.
My parents were teachers also. So
right.
I grew up with education in the house.
And so I think, vision is so important and representation is so important. And I think, I know we're kind of going over time, but my mother explain this experience to me, which I thought was very, very important. I asked her for a college class to tell me about her experience and her opinion about segregation and integration. My mother is the fourth of five children, and the fifth, my aunt, was the only one to actually switch from segregation to integration in high school. And I asked her what she thought about that, and she actually said that she thought that integration as it was exercised was actually poisonous. And I remember thinking, what? Like, I mean, I'm at one of the widest colleges at this time in my life, and I was just like, well, what is that? How is that possible? And she explained to me, when she was at her high school, her segregated high school, you had Black leaders. You had Black teachers, you had Black principals, the community was secure with Black lawyers, Black doctors. And when all of these things integrated, they integrated the children, but they certainly were not going to let Black people teach white kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden you lost all of the vision and representation of power.
Mm.
And she said, it's so much harder to have to go through life. And I felt this way, again, why Tonality started. So much harder to have to go through life imagining. I mean, you'd see certain examples, but I was not taught. I had one Black history teacher through my, 30 years of education.
You're talking about through college?
Through my doctorate.
Wow.
And we're not talking about music. I'm just talking about just, school. I had in middle school. And I would say, I guess we had one principal in my high school for a couple of years. But that was what I saw. And I think, we look at all of these environments, including the union, and when you don't see people who look like you in power, it is very hard to imagine that and to try to become it. And so I think it's really important to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah. That's well said. I have a personal question before I get to my closing questions, and something I'm curious about you because I know you're highly disciplined. I'm wondering about time management for you. Like, how do you manage your time? Do you consider yourself disciplined? And also, how do you balance, or do you balance, art, family, and business?
Lately, I've gotten better. I mean, right after George Floyd, I think a lot of choirs were trying to figure out how to move in this diversity realm. And we're looking to the couple of choirs that had made this a part of the mission. So at that time, there was no balance. I was receiving calls and, after kind of being exhausted and really kind of being very selective with who I talked to, I remember thinking, these are the conversations I've been trying to have for years. Mm-hmm. So it might not be easy, but like, this is the time where the platform is set up. You might as well step in, and make change where you can. So that was a lot. But I will say, I have been better about taking time. I start the day at the gym. That is kind of my time.
Good.
And I think I've made time, to check in with friends. I'll go on walks. I need to be probably more disciplined about setting that time aside. But certainly I feel that disciplined, focused for sure.
Right. For including, since your whole world is about inclusiveness, include fun time. You to schedule that in so that you have a long, healthy life.
Yeah, I'm working on that part.
Yeah. Well, I hope to be able to continue to contribute to that part of your life to encourage you, because I know as someone who put myself through college and and didn't have anyone to kind of lean back on, to fall back on in my family financially. I missed out on a lot of fun, but I fortunately had friends. So I'm repeating, continuing in carrying the torch of that, who made sure that I needed to understand that it wasn't all about work. That because that it's also about content, not just form. You have to have something to say. And I know that you have a lot to say about social activism and your passion and your pain and your rage and disappointments and all of that. But it's also just really important to, learn how to cook or
Yes.
take up hobbies, plant zucchinis. That's a confidence builder.
Yeah, I think I found that, I certainly have been like cause focused, but I think really in fighting these causes, I wasn't able to see me for all of me for such a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in some ways it was just easier to ignore myself and to fight these things. But I think now as I get older and I will say one thing for being out here is I've been able to kind of really accept all the parts of me that I had to kind of put on the side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning through talking about these things and really kind of discussing all the issues and intersectionality and, all these things to really to see and value who I am. And so that certainly has allowed for me to have more time and more space to just be. Right now is the time to shout. But also, I do think slowly I'm finding that and finding more friends, finding more allies, people are certainly shouting in so many beautiful ways. And it's like, I can watch and sit back at times too. I'm finding there's now a little bit of room for that too.
Good. I'm glad you're seeing it because when I look at you, from the very first time I met you, I see a magnificent person. That's what I see when I look at you and when I talk with you. So in addition to your ability and talent, which I have deep respect for, but what's behind it is really the reason that we're friends. And the reason that I wanted to share your story and will continue to. My closing questions, Alex, are, since the show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you both personally and professionally? And also, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Sure. Making it. I think for me, really just trying to find the things that are important, and just trying to find ways to give and be open. Again, I have found so far that when I work in different activities or experiences that serve the community, whether it be teaching sight reading or, doing events that are involved in caring about others, it has come back to me grander than I could have imagined. I know we are taught, and it seems like the environment here is, be about yourself. We're all here to win. But we really can win together. At least I have seen that in my experience. The things I have done with community have turned out to become more. I didn't know what SAG was in 2018. It's probably my own ignorance there.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, you do now.
I was going to say, look at what has happened. And the more I feel like I have been involved in just caring about others, which might seem, counter to what we are told LA is about. LA has continued to blossom opportunities for me. So I would say that's kind of the biggest thing. Find ways to serve others.
Okay. Yeah.
And then professionally, I think walk through the doors that open.
Yes.
I feel like every year I make goals, and by February, I'm laughing at how off I was. So that's certainly, this year was another one of those, so yeah, I just think, I don't know what it means to have a defined career, which for me, in the way I like to think, it would have been nice to have some stability, but I thought, but really the doors are opening. I'm finding random connections, and those connections are leading to other things. And that's how the Oscars happened.
How did that happen?
So I started teaching at LACSA, and the orchestra and the choir were asked to do the finale of the Grammys. So my first conducting of like an actual session was for the finale of the Grammys. And the music producer, Ricky Minor, who is amazing, such an inspirational person and a caring human being. We got to talk for a couple of minutes, and then I find out, I think it was a couple of days later, that I had been, I was able to be involved in the choir to do the Oscars because of Ricky Minor.
That's
and
great.
Again, like, who would have known that when I started working at this high school?
Right.
So, you know, doors open.
At this point of your life, this is my final closing question before I give you last words. At this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, if you could, what would you tell your younger self?
Ooh. That you are enough. That you are enough. And, you know, continue to live with that truth. You are loved, you have community, and you don't know how your voice might impact others. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Anything on your heart or mind for before we say goodbye?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. It's always good to talk with you.
Thank you.
I will say just some things for Tonality that are coming up.
Yeah.
We are going to be doing a fundraiser at the end of the last 2 weeks of July, starting on the 17th. And then our next season, I know COVID times, everyone's wondering who's doing what, how. We are going to be producing virtual videos, but they won't just be videos of the choir, you know, but trying to stick to the ways and the issues that Tonality cares about. The videos will be about the issues, and we'll be doing interviews with composers and organizational leaders. So hopefully people will tune in. You know, these causes don't go away just because we can't perform live. And so we certainly will be finding more ways. And I think actually some kind of innovative ways now that we are at home and we can reach more people to really help to further engage people in the causes that matter to all of us.
If people want to find out more about any of the things that are going on with Tonality and with you, one good place to go to is alexanderlblake.com. You've got Instagram is Alexander L. Blake, and Twitter at Alexander L. Blake, easy to remember.
You're right.
And your Facebook page, which is a little more formal, which is facebook.com/Alexander Lloyd Blake. Alex, thank you so much for spending this time with me, for making the time. It's great to see you continue to stay inspired and safe. And I want to thank everybody who's listening for joining Alex and I. Go up on iTunes and check out the new record. I don't think you'll be disappointed. The choir is exquisite. The music, it has depth musically and also culturally and emotionally. And I love this choir. The work that you're doing really moves me, and I can't wait to come hear you guys again when it's safe for us to all come out and gather.
Right.
Alex, thank you so much. It's great to see you.
You too.